Welcome to this video. In this session, we are talking about Incoterms 2020. The new Incoterms is effective from 1st January 2020. And to fully understand Incoterms, it is strongly recommended that you go through the ICC publication number 723 Incoterms 2020 rules. In this video, we are talking about X-Works. X-Works, the place of dispatch or the shipment X-Works. And my name is Anil Kumar. X-Works, delivery place. The seller delivers by placing the goods at the buyer's disposal. The seller, as usual, delivers by placing the goods at buyer's disposal. But this placing of goods happens at the place agreed, a named place, which is normally closer to the seller, and the delivery should happen within the agreed period. The seller delivers by placing the goods at the buyer's disposal at the named place within the agreed period, and it is not loaded on any means of conveyance. It is ready for loading but not loaded. The place is normally closer to seller and it is not cleared for export. So in X-Works, it is a minimum obligation for the supplier, the seller, the minimum liabilities, minimum responsibilities for the supplier, and maximum responsibility or liability for the buyer. So as you see, the buyer will not clear for export. The buyer will just keep the goods ready for loading into a means of conveyance nominated by the party who is buying. As far as the seller is concerned, his responsibility is only to make the goods ready for loading into the means of conveyance that will pick up. Seller will not arrange for export clearance, seller will not arrange for import clearance, seller will not pay the cost of carrying the goods, seller will not bear the insurance, seller will not be responsible for the goods from the moment it has been delivered. So what are the general obligations? As far as the seller is concerned, in X-Works, the obligation is to make the goods available, submit an invoice. As far as the buyer is concerned, the obligation is to pay for the goods for the shipment or the delivery that has been made by the seller. Regarding delivery obligations for X-Works, there are two types of FCA terms, but in X-Works there is only one. The seller must deliver by placing the goods at the named place within the agreed period, ready for loading onto buyer's collecting vehicle. The seller must deliver the goods ready for loading onto buyer's vehicle. Seller need not load. As far as the buyer is concerned, buyer must take delivery of the goods when they have been so delivered. These are the obligations with respect to delivery. With respect to transfer of goods in X-Works, the seller's obligation is seller bears all risk of loss or damage until they have been delivered. The seller bears all risk until they have been all delivered. The buyer bears all risk from the moment it has been delivered. The buyer is also responsible from the agreed time, from the agreed place if the buyer fails to nominate a vessel, provided the goods are identified as a contractual goods. So as we have seen, the seller delivers by placing the goods at the buyer's disposal. No obligation for the seller for anything. The risk, the cost, everything is transferred from the moment it is so delivered. As far as the transfer of risk is concerned, the buyer bears all the risk until it has been delivered. Seller bears all the risk until it has been delivered. Buyer bears all the risk from the moment it has been delivered. Buyer also bears the risk of failure to nominate a vessel to pick up. Buyer is responsible for notifying the seller when the vehicle will come, at what place, on what date and time. So buyer bears the risk for not notifying or not arranging for the vehicle at the agreed time and the agreed place, and for not taking delivery. Buyer bears all risk from the moment it has been delivered. What are the X-Works obligation for the seller for carriage? Seller has no obligation to the buyer for the contract for carriage. But at buyer's request, buyer's risk, buyer's cost, seller may assist in providing information or document or arranging for carriage. At buyer's return cost, seller may arrange for clearance for transit or transport or export. At the buyer's request, risk and cost, the seller may arrange for transit or export clearance or import clearance. At buyer's request, risk and cost, the seller may also arrange for carriage. The seller may arrange for carriage contract. As far as the buyer is concerned, in X-Works, the obligation is buyer must arrange for own transport or must contract for carriage at own risk and cost from the named place at the agreed time. Buyer must arrange for a carrier to pick up the goods at own risk and cost or must bring own transport. This is the responsibility of the buyer under X-Works Incoterms 2020. Incoterms 2020. What are the obligations for insurance? The seller's obligation is there is no obligation to the buyer to make the contract for insurance. As far as Ex Works is concerned, there is no obligation for the seller towards the buyer to make any contract for insurance. But at the buyer's request and cost, risk and cost, seller may arrange for information or documents for obtaining insurance. Seller may arrange for information or documents for arranging insurance at the buyer's request, risk and cost. There is no obligation by the seller towards the buyer for any insurance contract, or there is no obligation by the buyer towards the seller for any contract for carriage or insurance. So the seller may, at the buyer's request, risk and cost, arrange for information for obtaining insurance. Neither the buyer nor the seller is responsible for any contract for carriage or insurance. Ex Works the seller's obligation with respect to delivery document. Seller has no obligation to the buyer to provide any document. Seller has no obligation under Ex Works to provide any delivery document. At the buyer's request, risk and cost, seller may obtain a transport document. At buyer's request, risk and cost, seller may obtain a transport document. So, if it is an LC or a collection, and if the buyer is expecting a transport document from the seller, and if it is Ex Works, strictly speaking, seller is not responsible for any transport document. If any submitted by the seller, it will be at buyer's request, risk and cost. Buyer must provide suitable evidence of having taken delivery. Buyer must provide suitable evidence of having taken delivery. That means what? A goods receipt note should be given by the buyer to the seller on taking delivery. Ex Works Incoterms 2020 clearances. The seller must assist at the buyer's request, risk and cost to carry out and pay for formalities like license, security clearance and pre-shipment inspection for export, import as well as transit. The seller must assist at the buyer's request, risk and cost. Seller must assist at buyer's request, risk and cost to carry out and pay for formalities like license, security clearance, pre-shipment inspection for export, import and transit. Seller must at buyer's request, risk and cost assist to carry out and pay for formalities like license, security clearance, pre-shipment inspection for export, import and transit. Buyer must carry out and buyer must pay for formalities like license, security clearance, pre-shipment inspection for import, export and transit. Buyer must carry out and pay for all clearances for import, export and transit. These are the obligations under Incoterms 2020 for Ex Works. Checking and packaging. As usual, buyer has no obligation, while seller must pay for the cost. What cost? Checking the quality, checking the quantity. What is checking the quantity? Measuring, weighing and counting. And other necessary expenses for the purpose of delivery. The seller must also pay the cost for pre-shipment inspection if it is mandated in the country of export. The seller should pay for pre-shipment inspection if it is mandated in the country of export. Seller should also package the goods in the appropriate manner for transport and should be appropriately marked. The seller is supposed to have delivered at the agreed place on the agreed date if and only if the contractual goods are so identified. The delivery is complete only when the contractual goods are so identified. That is why it is necessary for proper packing and marking appropriate as per the contract to ensure the seller can claim the contracted goods have been delivered. Regarding Incoterms 2020 allocation of cost, the seller must pay all costs relating to the goods until they have been delivered. So risk transfer happens the moment it is delivered. That is, kept ready at the agreed place and time, ready for loading into buyer's vehicle. That is delivery. So until it has been so delivered, seller bears all costs. What does the buyer do? Buyer must pay for all costs from this moment, from the moment it has been delivered. Buyer must also reimburse the seller for any information or document provided at buyer's request and risk. The buyer must reimburse the seller. The buyer must also pay all duties and taxes for import, export and transit. The buyer must also bear the additional cost of failure to give notice, failure to nominate a vehicle or a vessel, failure of the carrier to pick up the goods, failure of the carrier to turn up on the right time at the right place. For all this, the buyer must bear the risk if the buyer is entitled to give notice and fail to give notice to the seller. Provided the goods are well identified and delivered by the seller as per Incoterms 2020 and the underlying contract. What are the obligations under Xworks 2020 regarding notices? The seller must notify to enable to take delivery. Seller must say goods are ready for delivery. What the buyer should do? Buyer must give sufficient notice, if entitled, on the point and time of taken delivery. The buyer should say the collecting vehicle will come to which gate, which place, and on what time of which day. So the buyer should give notice of the place, the exact place, as well as the exact time and date of taking delivery within the agreed period as per the underlying contract. While the seller should give notice of readiness for shipment so that the buyer may enable to take delivery of the goods. So these are the principal obligations of the buyer and seller under Incoterms 2020 for Xworks. Please watch out for other videos for detailed look at other Incoterms. In summary, the seller delivers by placing the goods at buyer's disposal within the agreed period at the named place, not loaded. The place is closer to the seller and the goods are not cleared for export. This is minimum obligation for the supplier. The supplier delivers by placing the goods at the agreed place and time ready for loading onto a collecting vehicle, not necessarily loaded. The collecting vehicle is arranged by the buyer. Buyer has to give notice at which place on which date the vehicle will come. The seller has to give notice that the goods are ready for shipment. These are the notices. As far as the documents are concerned, neither of them are responsible to each other, the buyer and seller, for the contract for carriage or insurance. Regarding delivery document, the buyer should give receipt of goods, the seller need not give any document. Regarding carriage contract and insurance contract, at the request of the buyer, the seller may assist with the documents or information or arrange for the contract. The buyer must reimburse all costs. Buyer should bear all costs from the moment it has been delivered if the vehicle does not turn up or vehicle is not nominated to pick up the goods. The supplier delivers by making the goods ready. The supplier may assist the buyer to obtain a transport document. Supplier may assist the buyer to provide for information or arrange for import, export and transit clearances at the risk and request and cost of the buyer. These are Incoterms. Thanks for watching. See you again soon.